Imagine discovering that this silent, completely invisible rot has been just eating away at the foundation of your house for a decade.
Oh, wow. That's a terrifying thought.
Right, because from the street, the place looks totally immaculate. The paint is fresh, the windows are spotless, the roof looks really solid.
But underneath, in the dark, the actual structure holding it all together is just silently collapsing.
Exactly. And you have absolutely no idea until, the floorboards just start giving way beneath your feet. So, welcome to today's deep dive, everyone.
Thanks for having me back.
If you're joining us, you are that listener, the learner, who just really loves to peek behind the curtain of different worldviews, right? To see how they construct their realities.
Yeah, and today we are looking at a theological worldview that claims this exact same kind of silent rot is happening, but inside the human soul.
Right, and it's driven by actions that modern culture basically tells us are completely harmless.
Yeah. The source material we're unpacking today is this document titled The Gravity of Sexual Sin and Spiritual Corruption.
Which is a heavy title.
It really is. It outlines a very strict, highly structured, biblical and theological perspective on sexual morality. And honestly, it operates on a premise that is just almost entirely at odds with how 21st century society functions.
Yeah, it's a massive contrast. But before we really get into the weeds here, let's just lay out our mission for today.
Always a good idea.
We are acting purely as your guides to map out the internal logic of this specific theological framework. So, regardless of where you personally stand on religion or morality, understanding the mechanics of this worldview is just a super fascinating exercise.
It really is an exercise in structural analysis.
Yeah, and to be crystal clear, we aren't taking sides here. We aren't endorsing these viewpoints or preaching to you. We're simply putting on our analytical hats to figure out how this text connects physical actions to spiritual consequences.
Exactly. We're just looking at the architecture of the argument. Mm-hmm. And to understand this perspective, we really have to recognize its core thesis.
Which is what exactly?
Well, it's the idea that actions involving human sexuality are never just physical. Like, modern society often treats these actions super lightly.
Oh, for sure. We laugh them off in pop culture or, actively celebrate them as expressions of personal freedom.
Right, but this document argues that these actions possess this unique gravity. It claims they reach way past biology and psychology, going straight into the spiritual core of a person.
So we aren't just looking at, a list of arbitrary rules here. We're looking at a progression.
Yes, exactly. A progression.
Let's dig into the baseline then. How does this framework actually define the relationship between the physical body and the spiritual self?
That's the perfect place to start. Because if you don't understand that foundation, the rest of these warnings just sound like, arbitrary rule breaking.
Right. It just sounds like a bunch of don'ts.
Exactly. So the overarching category this framework establishes is called sexual immorality. But within this worldview, that term isn't just some vague insult, right?
Yeah, it has a really highly specific definition.
It does. It encompasses any sexual activity that falls outside of the original divine design for marriage.
Okay, so it's a very clear boundary.
Very clear. And this worldview operates on the fundamental idea that the human body is inherently a temple.
A temple. Okay, let's pause on that concept for a second. The body as a temple.
Yeah, it's a sacred space designed for a specific spiritual purpose.
Right, and structurally, if a space is designated as sacred, treating it casually is exactly like taking a chisel to that house foundation we talked about earlier.
Oh, I like that connection, yeah.
Like you chip off a little piece over here on a Friday night, another little piece over there. To the casual observer, looking from the street, nothing has changed at all.
But the structural integrity is quietly compromised.
Exactly. But I'm trying to wrap my head around the actual mechanism here. Is the text arguing that if you break this rule, there is some immediate divine punishment, like a lightning bolt from the sky?
See, that is the really common misconception. But it's actually far more insidious than a lightning bolt.
Oh, really? How so?
The mechanism at work here is described as the gradual hardening of the heart. The framework posits that the real danger lies in the modern normalization of these acts.
Normalization. So just getting used to it.
Right. When a culture adopts an anything-goes mentality, people begin to view sexual immorality as fundamentally harmless.
Because, everyone else is doing it, right? And nobody is bursting into flames on the sidewalk.
Precisely. That's the exact trap this text warns against. The belief that it doesn't matter is the actual mechanism that causes the spiritual damage.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, by treating the sacred as casual, the individual slowly distances themselves from the divine presence. The gap just incrementally widens.
So the heart hardens over time.
Yes, and the person becomes entirely numb to the spiritual decay happening underneath the floorboards, all while thinking everything is perfectly fine.
Which brings up a really interesting tension. If the baseline is that the body is a temple, what happens when two people make a sacred vow within that temple?
That's where the text shifts its focus.
Right, because it moves from this broad category of physical acts to a very specific violation, which is adultery.
Yeah, the ultimate breaking of a covenant.
Exactly. And obviously that leaves these massive emotional and spiritual scars on families. But wait, how does someone even get there?
What do you mean?
Well, I imagine this text argues that nobody just wakes up on a random Tuesday and decides to destroy a marriage. Like, there has to be a precursor, right?
There absolutely is. And this is where the worldview makes this really radical pivot from external actions to internal intent.
Okay, so moving inside the mind.
Yes, it actually invokes a teaching from Jesus to make a much sharper point. It says that looking at someone with lustful intent basically equates to committing adultery in the heart.
Wait, really? So the violation doesn't start in a hotel room?
No, the text argues it begins entirely in the mind.
I'm genuinely struggling with this standard. You're telling me that in this framework, simply imagining something or just harboring a thought is judged with the same severity as actually carrying out the physical betrayal.
That is exactly what it's saying.
If we use like a botanical analogy here, the physical act of the affair is just the fully grown weed that everyone can finally see ruining the garden.
That's a great way to put it.
But you're saying the text cares just as much about the invisible seed that was planted in the dirt, like months ago?
Yes.
How is anyone supposed to police their own subconscious to that degree?
Honestly, if you're listening to this and thinking, wow, this sounds like an exhausting, impossible level of mental vigilance, you aren't alone.
It sounds incredibly intense.
It is, and that is the exact friction this text creates intentionally. It completely redefines the modern concept of sin.
How so?
Well, in most modern legal or ethical frameworks, you aren't penalized for a thought. You're only judged on your actions.
Right, like you can think whatever you want as long as you don't actually hurt anyone, the whole no harm, no foul doctrine of modern morality.
Exactly. But according to this worldview, the standard in the divine eyes is entirely different. Sin isn't just an external event that happens in the physical world.
It's an internal state of being.
Yes. The text argues that mental discipline is basically paramount to spiritual survival because your thoughts are the steering wheel for your soul.
So if you allow the mind to entertain the betrayal,
the spirit has already begun the process of corruption, yeah, long before the body ever acts on it.
Wow. That makes the mind sound less like a safe haven and way more like an active battlefield.
Which is exactly how they frame it.
And that naturally leads us to the internal drivers this text issues these severe warnings about. If the corruption starts in the mind, what actually fuels it?
The source points directly to lust.
Right, and then it targets its most modern, industrialized form, which is pornography. But let's look at the engine of lust first. The text suggests people underestimate it because it's invisible, right?
Yeah, it defines lust as this totally insociable engine. It feeds on desire, imagination, and just constant exposure to temptation.
So it's not just a passing thought.
No, the underlying mechanism here isn't just about having an illicit thought. It's about what that sustained thought does to your perception of humanity.
Oh, that's interesting. What does it do?
Over time, unchecked lust weakens spiritual discipline and fundamentally alters how a person views others.
It stops them from seeing people as like complex creations of God and just reduces them to objects for personal gratification.
Precisely. And this creates a really dangerous momentum. The text argues that this internal engine slowly, systematically pulls a person away from purity.
So it's breaking down their defenses.
Yeah, it lowers their inhibitions and compromises their boundaries until they find themselves doing things they previously swore they would never, ever do.
It's the slow chisel on the foundation again, but powered by internal desire.
Exactly.
And then the text applies this ancient concept to the digital era. It labels pornography as one of the most widespread destructive traps of our generation.
It does. It has a lot to say about it.
It describes it as a tool that distorts relationships and replaces real intimacy with what it calls artificial pleasure. And I really want to linger on that phrase, artificial pleasure, because it is such a vivid way to describe a physiological trick.
Yeah, it's a very specific term. How do you read that in the context of the text?
Well, think about it like physical nourishment, right? Let's say I eat a giant family-sized bag of heavily processed neon orange junk food.
Which, let's be honest, we've all done.
Exactly. And honestly, I might have done exactly that last weekend. But when you do that, it tricks your brain and your stomach into feeling temporarily full.
The dopamine hits.
Yeah, the dopamine hits, the salt hits, and you feel satisfied for a fleeting moment. But your body hasn't actually received a single vitamin or nutrient.
Right, it's empty calories.
Worse than empty. In fact, forcing your system to process all those artificial chemicals leaves you entirely malnourished, lethargic, and just physically drained.
And you're connecting this to the text's view on artificial intimacy.
Yeah, the text seems to argue that pornography does exactly this, but to the soul. It provides this massive spike of artificial pleasure while completely draining a person's actual spiritual strength.
That's a really powerful analogy.
Yeah.
And if we take your junk food comparison further, the danger isn't just the malnourishment.
What else is it?
It's that you eventually lose your appetite for real food altogether.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The document specifically notes that this habit drains spiritual strength, brings heavy guilt, and essentially deafens a person to the divine voice.
So it's blocking the signal.
Right. It frames this not merely as, a bad psychological habit, but as an active spiritual battle.
Because it's not just about dopamine receptors in the brain. It's about total isolation.
In this worldview, yes, absolutely. These modern habits are viewed as deliberate severings of one's connection to God.
So the artificial pleasure basically creates a self-sustaining cycle.
Yes. You indulge, you feel the artificial high, and then it's immediately followed by crushing guilt and shame.
Which just causes you to hide and isolate yourself spiritually.
Exactly. And because you feel so isolated and unworthy, you seek out the artificial comfort all over again. It's a closed loop that just keeps the person stuck.
Okay, so if we follow the logic of this text, you have the initial compromise of the temple foundation. You have the seeds of betrayal planted in the mind. You have the engine of lust running, fueled by the artificial junk food of the digital age.
It's a compounding effect.
Yeah. So where does this road actually lead? What is the ultimate consequence when this entire system is just allowed to run unchecked for years?
The document outlines a fifth point to answer that. It focuses on sexual perversion and unnatural desires.
Okay, what does that look like in this framework?
The source argues that the ultimate consequence of this unchecked progression is a total fundamental distortion of reality and purpose.
A distortion of reality.
Yes, the original divine design for human sexuality is completely abandoned in favor of pure, unadulterated pleasure.
So holiness is just removed from the equation entirely.
Entirely.
But what really struck me here is that the text doesn't say the worst possible outcome is some dramatic, scandalous downfall that makes the evening news.
No, it does.
The chilling end state it describes is actually quiet. It says the most dangerous state is reached when people continually follow these desires without any repentance, and as a result, their conscience becomes dull.
It uses the phrase complete spiritual blindness.
A dulling conscience. That seems to be the absolute crux of this entire theological warning.
It really is. It's the scariest part of the whole document.
It feels a bit like moving into an apartment right next to a set of active train tracks.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Right. The first week you live there, every time a massive freight train goes by at 3 a.m., the noise is absolutely deafening.
It wakes you up in a panic.
Exactly. The pictures rattle on the wall, the whole house shakes, you think the world is ending. But if you live there for a year, 2 years.
You stop noticing it.
Yeah, eventually your brain just normalizes the chaos. You don't even hear the train anymore.
Yeah.
You can literally sleep right through a massive locomotive roaring past your bedroom window.
And if we apply your train analogy back to the text, the danger isn't just that you sleep through the noise. It's that you eventually forget you are sleeping in a hazardous zone altogether. This normalization is presented as the ultimate danger.
Because it means the internal alarm system, the conscience, has been permanently disabled.
Exactly. You don't even know you're in danger anymore.
I mean, the whole evolutionary benefit of physical pain is that it tells you to pull your hand away from a hot stove, right?
Right.
So if you lose the ability to feel spiritual pain, you just let your hand burn.
That is exactly how this framework views it. The true danger, according to this worldview, isn't just committing a wrong act.
It's worse than that.
Yeah, it is losing the very capacity to recognize the act as wrong in the first place. When the pursuit of pleasure entirely overrides the concept of holiness, this spiritual blindness sets in.
So you adapt to the dark.
You have adapted to the dark so completely that you actually believe it is daylight. What once felt clearly wrong starts to feel completely normal, maybe even good.
Wow.
And at that point, the text argues, you are basically walking into destruction with a smile on your face.
Man, that is a deeply sobering perspective. So having walked through all the mechanics of these specific sins, the broad immorality, the mental seeds of adultery, the internal engines of lust and pornography, and this ultimate distortion of reality, the text actually pulls back at the very end.
It does. It zooms out.
It examines the underlying architecture of its own argument. It stops looking at the individual actions and starts looking at the whole map.
It provides a concluding thesis, yes.
Yeah.
The text states that none of these sins are isolated events. They are, in its specific terminology, pathways.
Pathways. See, this is where the framework gets incredibly dynamic to me.
How so?
Well, using the word pathways changes the entire perspective for you as the listener. It stops being about a single, isolated misstep like tripping over a rock on a walk, and it becomes about getting onto a highway that is actively moving in the wrong direction.
Right. It's about direction and momentum.
Exactly. The implication here is that in the spiritual realm, you can never just stand still. You are constantly in motion.
You are always either moving toward this defined spiritual truth, or you are accelerating away from it. And the text makes it emphatically clear that the ultimate danger is living in these patterns.
Stay on the wrong highway.
Yeah, staying on it without awareness, without repentance, and without any desire to change direction. The document warns that human nature often tricks people into thinking they have, plenty of time to turn around later.
But the reality of a pathway is that it builds momentum.
Exactly.
The longer you drive in the wrong direction, the more miles you have to cover to get back. The habits become completely entrenched.
And the spiritual blindness makes it harder to even see the exit signs, let alone take them.
Right. It feels almost hopeless at that point.
But it is really crucial to note that the text doesn't end on a note of fatalism or total despair. There is a vital shift in the document's tone right at the very end.
Okay, so it offers a way out.
It does. It moves from diagnosing this massive, terrifying spiritual problem to offering the solution.
Yeah.
And it identifies that solution primarily as awareness.
So it isn't just trying to terrify the reader into submission.
No, the text explicitly states that the goal of laying out these stark warnings isn't to paralyze people with fear or to crush them with condemnation.
It's meant to be an alarm clock.
Yes. It's designed to wake up the person who has fallen asleep on the train tracks.
Yeah.
By explicitly mapping out the danger, by showing the reader that invisible rot in the foundation, the text hopes to motivate them.
It calls the reader to actively fight back.
Right, exactly. In this worldview, recognizing that you are on the wrong highway is the first completely necessary step to protecting your soul and intentionally choosing the path that leads back to life.
It's a call to active resistance against cultural normalization.
Very well put.
Well, to pull all of this together and just recap the journey this source text has taken us on today. It started by establishing a baseline where the physical body is a sacred temple, arguing that physical actions have profound, inescapable spiritual consequences.
Right, the foundation.
Then it moved inward, basically blowing up the modern legalistic loophole by arguing that betrayal begins invisibly in the mind. We looked at the internal engines of lust and the spiritually starving artificial intimacy of modern pornography.
And then it culminated in the ultimate warning.
Yeah, the warning that the unchecked pursuit of pleasure disables the internal alarm system, leading to a dulled conscience where the wrong thing feels entirely normal.
And to reiterate for you listening, our goal today was to thoroughly map out this specific theological perspective.
Purely as a structural exercise.
Exactly. We wanted to provide you with a clear-eyed, analytical look at how this framework defines the deep, inextricable connection between physical actions and spiritual health. We explored its internal logic, its definitions of corruption, and its ultimate call for awareness and course correction.
And, as always, we want to leave you, the learner, with something to chew on, something that builds on the text but expands out into your own life, regardless of your personal worldview.
It's an important question to ask.
It really is. This source talks extensively about how repetitive actions dull the conscience and create spiritual blindness, making the wrong thing feel completely normal.
Right.
So, here's a thought for you to ponder as you go about your day. In any area of your life, be it your ethics, your relationships, or just how you spend your time, how do you actually measure your own baseline of normal?
That's a great question.
If Our environment, our culture, and our daily habits are constantly shifting our perception of what is acceptable. By what fixed external metric do you calibrate your own internal compass?
How do you know you're still on track?
Exactly.
Yeah.
How do you ensure that you aren't just seamlessly, quietly adapting to a slowly dulling conscience?
Something to really think about.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll catch you next time.